know about the Biblio Lifestyle weekly newsletter? Readers really like it, and I think you will too. It's filled with reading and lifestyle tips, curated book list, recipes, roundups of what's new, and other fun things I think you'll enjoy. Subscribers receive an email every Friday, and it's free. So sign up at bibliolifestyle.com. Now on to the episode. Hello, I'm Victoria from Biblio Lifestyle, and you're listening to the Reader's Couch podcast, the show that will help you bridge the gap between living a full and busy life to one where you're reading, learning new things, and having fun. Today on the couch, I'm so excited to welcome author Karen Azoulay to talk about her new book, Flowers and Their Meanings: The Secret Language and History of Over 600 Blooms. Flowers and Their Meanings is a stunning illustrated exploration of Victorian language of flowers, including the multicultural history, rituals, and mythology behind over 600 flowers, herbs, and trees. Now, in this episode, Karen and I talk about so many things. We explore the secret language and history of flowers, the 19th century craze of flower dictionaries, and we even dive into the symbolism behind Edith Wharton's works, and also the meaning behind Princess Diana's wedding bouquet. Plus, Karen shares some flowers she would bring to a list of popular occasions based on the messages they would convey. So, let's get into the episode, because I can't wait for you to listen to my chat with author Karen Azoulay. Hi there, could you do me a favour really quick? Would you pretty please subscribe to the show, leave me a 5-star rating if you like it, and share an episode or two with your bookish friends? Better yet, if you could drop a link to the show or to your favourite episode in your book club or bookish group chat, that works too. I promise, it only takes a few seconds, it really helps the show, plus I'll be incredibly grateful for it. So thanks in advance, and now on to the episode. Hi readers, welcome again to the Reader's Couch. I'm your host, Victoria Wood, and here on the couch with me is an artist and author whose projects have been featured and reviewed in publications such as the New York Times, the New Yorker, and Vogue. But she's here on the couch with me to talk about her new book, Flowers and Their Meanings: The Secret Language and History of Over 600 Blooms. Please welcome to the couch, Karen Azoulay. Hi, Karen.
Hi, Victoria. It's so wonderful to be here talking with you.
I'm so excited to have you here. Can't wait to get more into your new book, Flowers and Their Meanings. But I want to know how you're feeling. I mean, your book's out. It's been out for a few weeks now. How are you feeling? How excited are you?
Oh, it's so exciting. This is my first book, and my background is as a visual artist. So this wasn't something that was on the horizon forever. And then a few years ago, I just decided to jump into this and totally pour my heart and everything into it. And then for it to be here and like a book and going around and meeting readers and talking about it. And everybody loves talking about flowers. I've been having so much fun. It's very exciting.
Oh, I love to hear it. And I'm excited to have you here as well, because I too love talking about flowers, but I don't want to share it. I want readers to hear straight from you. Tell us about your new book and what can readers expect when they pick up a copy?
Sure. So the book is centered around the language of flowers, also known as florography, which was this 19th century craze of these books. There was hundreds of different editions and volumes published, and they were bestsellers. I consider it similar to like a stocking stuffer at Urban Outfitters or something like that. And especially young people and young women bought these books, which were flower dictionaries. And the idea is that you could put together a bouquet using a flower dictionary, and each flower would carry a secret symbolic meaning. On the other end, somebody receives a bouquet, they rush to their dictionary and decode it. So it's a very fun and romantic cultural phenomenon that happened. And the first part of the book dives into the history of that culture and that trend and builds up the history and the context of what was happening around that time and shortly before that, helped to shape the flower craze and love of everything botanical in the 19th century. Then the bulk of the book is actually a flower dictionary. So there are flower symbols, over 600 that you can look up that are listed. But I've also collected stories, anecdotes about all of these flowers. So whether it's mythological, cultural, like a ritual, superstition, medicine. And for that, I was looking at cultures all around the globe. And so the book is, I wrote it and I did the artwork. To create the artwork, they're collages of 19th century botanical illustrations. So I found thousands of these beautiful 19th century illustrations to choose from and create these arrangements. And then I interjected my own photography, which would feature things like eyes, mouths, hands, these elements that suggest communication and relationship. So, yeah. And then in the back of the book, there's a mood index where some of the most interesting flower symbols are grouped together for various types of moods, like sadness and condolences, compliments and cheer, flirtation and sensuality, love and friendship. But there's also insults and loathing, because one of the things that I found so captivating about this culture is that it also was funny and dramatic and nasty and sinister sometimes, not only romantic and cheerful.
Absolutely. And I really love the floral index in the back, the mood index. I thought it was incredibly helpful. And yes, not everything is happy and pleasant and, very lovey. There are also, not so pleasant meanings there as well. But I love to kind of read and learn more about this craze that was occurring during the Victorian era, the 19th into the 20th century. And what's fascinating is that there are just so many women who use flowers and the meanings behind them in a variety of ways. And because this is a bookish podcast and we are readers, it was really heartwarming to learn about Edith Wharton, because there's a lot of floral symbolism in the Age of Innocence. I picked up on it, but to kind of just, dive in a bit more to see what each flower means was just quite the adventure. Tell me about you unraveling this with Edith Wharton, because it was fascinating for me.
Oh, yeah. Well, it was very fun. There was some research surprises there. So Edith Wharton is an interesting figure because she's known to have used the language of flowers in her books. You gave the example, The Age of Innocence. The flowers that are given to the different women reflect the attitudes and feelings about them. So Edith Wharton is obviously somebody people are very fascinated with. There's really interesting biographies about her. And she is known to have had an affair with this man, Morton Fullerton. And before they had acknowledged their interest in each other, there was a day where they were on the side of the road where their car had broken down and it was being fixed. And they had this really nice time next to some witch hazel. Following this, Morton sends Edith Wharton a letter, and nothing is in the letter stating his feelings, but he includes a sprig of witch hazel. And so she immediately understands what he means. And I love botanical mementos, the idea of keeping a little flower from a bouquet or from a trip somewhere to capture a memory. People often will slip a flower or leaf into a book to press it. So in itself, that flower had that power. And she knew that he was thinking of that really special time and communicating that. And it also just so happens that witch hazel means a spell. And, he was not only a friend, but he was also a reader of her work. So I would imagine that he would be aware of the language of flowers and their meanings, and that he also could have been literally using the flower to communicate that he was under a spell. And so I wanted to look further into Edith Wharton because of these two exciting reasons. And I came across in a footnote of an academic paper about Edith Wharton that in her diaries, she kept many, many diaries, that there's one page that had simply the date and the name of a park in Paris, and no further words for that entry. Instead, there was a wildflower pressed on that page. And it's speculated that that is the day that they consummated their affair. And so I was very excited to find that out. And I went to try and track down the diary. And that diary has not been digitized visually. And I contacted the library, the Lilly Library, that has these diaries, with an email inquiring if I could see that page. And I got an immediate bounce back email that was telling me, sorry, no emails will be returned for 6 months. It was some really long amount of time. They were doing a complete renovation, moving library. And so they're sort of shut down. And so I was really disheartened because I thought, well, I'm on a deadline. Time is of the essence. I'm not going to be able to see this. But then very shortly after, later that day, I got an email from one of the librarians. And she said, we're closed. We're not responding to emails. But I saw this email and I'm surrounded by all the boxes of our library that is in transit. And I just happened to be standing right next to the box that contained that diary. So I thought, I'll just go ahead and take a peek and take a photo with my cell phone so that you can see it. And that just felt so magical, imagining how many boxes of books they had and that she just happened to be there. And that was so sweet. The experience of writing this book, all of the librarians and archivists contacting, it's so wonderful having those exchanges. So it was exciting to see that page. I had a botanist look to try to determine what the flower was, and it was a little bit too fallen apart and crumpled to actually determine it through a photo, but it's likely from the aster family. And later, in time for publishing, I was able to have the library take a proper photo of that page. And so there's a peek of that page in the book. And so that felt very exciting, like a fun little scoop.
Absolutely. It was really great seeing a picture of that photograph there. Just really fascinating that words need not be, said. You just needed to include a flower and immediately the meaning was deciphered. And in more, I guess you could say, popular culture, recent history, we just had the coronation of King Charles III and Camilla. And it brought me back to Princess Diana Spencer, when she was getting married. There were 2 yellow canary roses in her bouquet. And to kind of know now that those 2 roses have a significant meaning was also mind-blowing. I mean, how did you feel knowing all that?
Well, it's a very fun and juicy story. And I have to say that there is nobody in the world who will likely be more certainly aware of the language of flowers than any florist that is working with the British royal family. So these things are not done with ignorance or thoughtlessness. The coverage of the coronation, many sources were pointing out all of the floral symbolism in the regalia and the headpieces and the clothing, and both through history and in new modern ways. This is a very purposeful thing where flowers that represent certain people or places or ideas are used. So yes, I mentioned in the book that she had this bouquet, this long, opulent bouquet filled with white flowers. And those flowers have all sorts of suitable symbolism. For example, gardenias mean transport of joy. Lily of the valley means return of happiness. Veronica means fidelity. And there was also ivy, which means marriage. And those two yellow roses you're talking about are very awkwardly stuck in and kind of hidden. And it doesn't look like part of this traditional, beautifully arranged bouquet. And now they are a type of rose that was named after Lord Mountbatten, which was Prince Charles, like his honorary grandfather, basically. But yellow roses mean jealousy and infidelity. And so, I'm doing some speculating, but isn't it interesting that those yellow flowers are so strangely and oddly tucked in there? And, perhaps it was a sign of some grievance. And I think that this kind of dishy speculation is part of the fun culture of the language of flowers.
Yep, couldn't agree with you more. My speculation is someone knew what was going on. So if she pled ignorance in the beginning, then I'm like, well, okay, the florist knew. Someone knew. It's just, I couldn't agree with you more. It's just everything is intentional, every detail. So I do find it suspect that absolutely no one would not have known what two canary roses, yellow roses, meant. So,
the florist knew. I mean, flowers carry multiple meanings. And when people learn that yellow roses have the unfortunate significance of jealousy and infidelity, they sometimes are upset. And this is one culture of floral symbolism, a culture of floral symbolism that was really cultivated mainly by English and French people in the 19th century. And of course, there are other cultures of floral symbolism. Japan and China, for example, each have rich traditions of floral lexicons, and all around the world. But, for example, for some people who live in Texas, they love yellow roses. That is the state flower. And, it has that meaning. But specifically, the 19th century Victorian language of flowers is something that the court florist would very much know. And so interesting.
Absolutely interesting. So I'm really curious about you, though. Tell me about your inspiration for this book, specifically, the Victorian era, because this is definitely a 19th century book. So share with us, Karen, what was your inspiration for putting this book together, and what made you decide to just collect all this information and give us this beautiful dictionary?
Oh, well, thank you. I find the 19th century to be very intriguing, and I think it's because it's far back enough in history that it seems like a totally other time, yet it's close enough that I can wrap my head around it. And there's so many fascinating things that happened in that century. my background is as a visual artist. I'm an interdisciplinary artist, which means I use all sorts of mediums and techniques and mix them together for whatever the project is at hand. And I've always been interested in symbolism, including floral symbolism. And I had been making work many years ago where I was using flowers and I was thinking of floral symbolism. And I started thinking about this specific tradition of florography more and more. And I curated a group show in Prospect Park here in Brooklyn. It was there's like a faux Grecian temple. And I invited a group of artists to show mostly sculptural work that incorporated flowers, either fresh flowers or some kind of floral motif, with the understanding that I was going to provide a dictionary and that viewers could tour the exhibit and read each piece using that dictionary. And so for that exhibition, I self-published a small little stapled booklet. It was 20 pages, and it was a list of many of the symbols, not as many that are in this book, and a series of photographs that I took. The photos linked flowers with iconic hand gestures that share similar meaning. And so if you were to have, for example, a thumbs up alongside goldenrod, which means encouragement, to help illuminate this idea of this symbolic value of these flowers. And it really was something that I thought was just for that one show, for that one day, but people loved it and they wanted to get one for their friend or their sister or their mother, or, I had to print more, and then I had to print more. And I got invited to talk about this project at various colleges and art galleries. And each time I went and prepared my slideshow and my notes, I would do a little bit more research to sort of edit and update. And I learned more and more about the history and became more passionate and curious about it. And that was over a few years. And I started to develop my own perspective and noticed some of the aspects of the history that I didn't see in any of the books that I wished was in there. And so that is really, so the experience of sharing this topic with students and seeing the reaction that people had is what inspired me to create a book, because I just wanted to share these fascinating stories with everybody.
I love it. And what an origin story indeed. Folks wanted more. There was an interest, and, now the book is here. So I'm really excited. I hope readers will pick up a copy. Again, Flowers and Their Meanings, The Secret Language and History of Over 600 Blooms. All right. So, Karen, let's break up the show a bit and play a little game.
Oh, yes.
I've entitled this one, You'll Bring the Flowers. So I'm going to give you a list. I'm going to just share some popular occasions and you'll tell me what flower you would bring and maybe, what message it would convey. Are you ready?
Yeah, sounds fun.
Yay. All right. So what flower would you bring for a birthday?
Well, for a birthday, something that is bright and shares the feeling, your connection to that person, especially if it was for a friend. Acacia means friendship. Another similar symbol, oak-leafed geranium, means true friendship. Geraniums, of course, there are many varieties with different colors and scents, and they all have different symbols.
Yay, love it. What flower would you bring for an anniversary of, a partner, a spouse, long-term relationship? You're celebrating an anniversary. What flower would you bring?
Well, the ideas of marriage and fidelity and commitment were very popular themes in the language of flowers. And it could be nice to do a combination when you mix more than one flower to create almost like a little poem. So Indian jasmine means I attach myself to you. And that could be very nice paired with some ivy, which means marriage. Also, if you added in some honeysuckle, that means bonds of love.
Yay, I like that. Okay, what flowers would you bring if someone, a family or friend, is not doing well, they're under the weather, maybe they're in hospital, and you want to convey getting well soon? So you basically, it's a get well soon bouquet or flower. What would you bring?
Well, there are many flowers that have sympathetic symbolism, many especially for people who have lost somebody. But for somebody who was under the weather, it might be a nice idea to give them some chrysanthemum. The symbol is cheerfulness under adversity. So something, you know, chrysanthemums are so cheery and colorful and just like poof of color. Although, to be careful, because a yellow chrysanthemum means slighted love. So with all these things, you have to be very careful because there's always the chance of miscommunication.
Yep, a color can throw you off indeed. But condolences, yes, someone who's lost someone recently, family member or friend. What flower would you bring to offer condolences?
Well, for condolences, there are many flowers you could choose from. Status, which some people refer to as sea lavender, means sympathy. Periwinkle means tender recollections. And depending on exactly what it is you want to convey, marigold means grief. And in the Victorian era, marigolds were often added to wreaths for mourning to express extreme grief. Another nice flower could be zinnia, which means thoughts of absent friends.
Oh, interesting. See, zinnias were one of the first things I remember planting. I had a whole corner of them.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, and the last one, and this is something personal, I often like to send flowers to express thanks. So if someone would like to send some flowers just to say thank you, thanks for being a friend, thanks for attending, thanks for showing up, thanks for your support, just expressing thanks, what flowers would they send?
Well, there are various options of flowers that could express gratitude. Um, Agrimony means thankfulness. White bellflower means gratitude. But something else that's interesting to think about is the flowers that were available and popular in England, France, and America in the 19th century is not the same assortment that are available today. And there are a variety of reasons for that. But some of the flowers, the beautiful flowers that are available to us in current flower shops, are not in the Victorian flower dictionaries. However, culture continues to develop symbols for flowers. And I do have a couple of pages at the beginning of the book dedicated to the types of flowers that did not appear in the 19th century dictionaries, but these flowers seem to be gaining an agreed upon symbolism. So one example would be a peach rose, which it has two symbols, gratitude and also sincerity. An orange rose, so very similar, an orange rose and a peach rose means thank you, congratulations, and enthusiasm. And another one would be Lysianthus, which means appreciation.
Yay, I love it. And I remember that section in the book because one thing I was very surprised wasn't a thing back then. I don't know why, but it was baby's breath.
Yes, that's right. And it's so common to see photographs, decor inspiration, still lives, things about the Victorian aesthetic that include baby's breath. And it's so interesting how our collective memory of a certain time or an aesthetic changes and becomes misunderstood. So, baby's breath was not a flower that was available or common at that time. It was right around the turn of the century into the 20th century that it started to be cultivated and available for gardens to begin with. And to me, it's really interesting to think about the difference between floral aesthetic from that era and now. And many of the sort of British cottage gardens that people think of is something that happened just a little bit later. In terms of the arrangements that people made in the 19th century, a lot of the things they were interested in is maybe sometimes surprising to people. The inclusion of fruit, like a stem from a tree or a vine that had fruit on it, was popular. Also, many of the most popular flowers, for example, violet, these gem tone flowers that were really delicate. And one of the things to keep in mind is that if someone created an elaborate arrangement, let's say a centerpiece for a dinner party, their guests would know that they went to all of that trouble just for them, because those flowers would mostly all be wilted and gone by the next day. However, today, the flowers that are mostly cultivated and bred and available are flowers that are they're chosen and also bred for longevity, and also flowers that will transport well as they get shipped around the world. And so if you were to create an arrangement today with some of the most popular flowers that are widely available, that's an arrangement that could last a week or maybe longer.
That is so true, because when I purchase fresh flowers at the store, because I do like putting them together, my husband is always amazed because sometimes I'll have flowers up to 3 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're absolutely right. Flowers are lasting such a long time. And when I think back to, my grandmother cutting flowers from the garden, they would be wilted in a day or two. They never normally would last that long, especially tea roses and other things she would have. But things have changed quite dramatically. Okay, so I want to get into your writing life with this project. How long did it take for you to write and pull together flowers and their meanings?
So I had been thinking about the topic and sort of dreaming of the book for a while, and I had notes from preliminary research and things like that. But from when I knew I was going to do the book, it was about 2 years of just intense, focused work for the research, the writing, and the artwork.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was about a year of things that had to do with, layout and, other kind of work fixing and moving things around for the book. But the main aspect of putting the words and images on the page took about 2 years.
What would you say was the most difficult part of your creative process?
I would say that the most difficult part was having so many ideas and stories to share and needing to trim them down to make it into a concise book that would fit on the page. There's just so much and so many histories and things like that. So I would say that in general, I always, my issue is too many ideas.
Too many ideas. I think a lot of creatives can relate to that one. So this book had a focus on the flowers of the Victorian era. Do you foresee yourself maybe writing something with a focus on present day flowers, maybe?
Yeah, that would be very interesting. That is something I've given thought to. We'll see. I definitely have some projects in the works, but it's a little too early to say for sure. But I think that could be very interesting.
But I'm glad that you're open-minded to possibly doing another project. I love this dictionary. There's so many breeds and variations available now. So yeah, I would look forward to another book if possible. But I want to get into your reading life really quick. Even though we're here to talk about flowers and their meanings, we want to know what you're reading. So tell me about the last book or books that you finished reading that you'd now recommend.
Well, in the lead up to my book coming out, it was a time of some anxiety and lots of things to do and to worry about and think about. So it was really fun for me to have a moment of escape to actually read some romance books, which is not my typical genre. And one book that I really enjoyed was 7 Days in June by Tia Williams. And then another book that I really enjoyed recently was Seen Unseen, which is actually a children's book. And it's about the internment camps, the prison camps where Japanese people were taken and held during World War II. And it was written by Elizabeth Partridge, and it has really beautiful illustrations by Lauren Tamaki. But, it's one of those books that even though it's written for children, it's something that I think anybody could appreciate. Another book that I read recently and really enjoyed was This is a Story of a Happy Marriage by Ann Patchett. And that's a collection of personal essays. And I first turned to that book because one of the essays is about the experience of being a writer and a sort of like what to expect when you're expecting a book. And so I was very interested, intrigued to read that. But then I enjoyed it and read the rest of the book about her life and all sorts of things. So yeah, I enjoyed that.
Yay. Any childhood favorites that you can remember?
Yes, there's so many books I enjoyed as a child. There was one book called Nyanuki that was about a Shoshone girl who was kidnapped and ran 1,000 miles to find her family. And that's something that I've talked about with various people. Apparently, it's really a very common thing for children to love books where there's sort of the stranded child has to find their way home. They're like lost in the woods and things like that. And another book that I can barely remember, but I remember it had a big impact on me at the time was Harriet the Spy. I definitely have the detective investigative impulse. And so I remember enjoying that.
Yay, love it. All right, so on the show, we also love indie bookstores. So share with our listeners a favorite indie bookstore of yours.
Well, I've been thinking about bookstores a lot lately because I've been traveling around and having a wonderful time with different bookstores local in New York. I, of course, love McNally Jackson. I did a little mini tour in Canada. I'm originally from Canada, and there's a few bookstores that I had just such a wonderful experience with. One of them is Type Books in Toronto, which is a fantastic store. But there is a store that really sticks out. And if anyone finds themselves in Montreal, I really recommend that they check out Distill. This store, it's a beautiful, well-curated bookstore, but it has such a community feeling. When you go in this store, you can't tell who works there and who doesn't, because there will be someone behind the counter and they'll welcome you in and start talking and making book recommendations. And then they say, "Oh, no, I don't work here." But they were behind the counter, or people just approaching people and say, "Oh, are you interested in, can I help you?" The owner, Ode, she just has cultivated such a special space. She does something where people will come, they call it their book club, and people will come and then you get a glass of wine or sparkling water, and then you choose a spot to sit in the store and then you read. And so everyone comes together and they don't talk, but they just have a drink and they read. And then at the end, you can buy a book or you don't have to buy a book. But, for people who don't really want to talk but want to be around people, I thought that was a really interesting thing to find out about.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just love bookstores. They're just always just a great place. All right, so Karen, kind of wrapping things up and getting back to flowers and their meanings. I mean, I know you've done your job, you've written the book, but what are you hoping readers will learn or feel or take away after they've picked up a copy of Flowers and Their Meanings?
Well, I'm just so passionate about all of the floral history, and there's just so many stories that are quite surprising. So I hope that a reader will be entertained and surprised, but I really would love readers to leave the book feeling curious and thinking about the ways in which we put meaning to things, maybe rethinking their relationship to flowers, whether it's using this tradition as a prompt or developing their own symbolism and meaning to the flowers that they choose for themselves or to give to others.
Absolutely. Karen, thank you so much for coming on the show and speaking with me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Oh, thank you so much, Victoria. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you so much for listening to the Reader's Couch podcast. Please subscribe to the show, share it with a friend, and take a few seconds to leave a rating and review. Until next time, stay lounging, stay reading, and whenever you're in doubt, go straight to your local bookstore or library. Thanks again for listening, and happy reading.